It was just a strange thing that it just happened. 80% of the voters are white American.
But what we've just witnessed is the problem with this show.
It seems like every season, the MVP race only gets more competitive. This year, I've talked about it a lot, and I've also talked about a lot of the candidates as a whole. I've made my fair share of Giannis and Jokic videos, and Embiid I only plan to talk about in the future. Hell, I think I've even made 1 or 2 videos about the MVP conversation as a whole. But somewhere this year, something happened to the MVP conversation that I don't like, and honestly, it could be ruining basketball. For I would say a majority of the year, the leading #1 candidate to win the MVP has been Nikola Jokic. If Jokic was to win the MVP this year, he'd be winning his 3rd straight MVP, only done by a few people. And I'm not gonna lie, it wouldn't have been that crazy. He was the #1 seed in the Western Conference, he was having some of the best stats in basketball, and he did everything he could to win the award. Now, I've made this pretty obvious, whether it was on YouTube or on Twitter, but I've said multiple times, I think Giannis should win the MVP. But to be fair, and I've said this in every single video, if you have a completely different MVP candidate, like maybe Jokic, Embiid, maybe Tatum or KD, I don't mind what your opinion is, and to be honest, for a lot of people, you could make justification for who the MVP is. And in my head, I really thought everyone had the same thing to say. Whether you're voting for Jokic to win MVP or Giannis, it's just basketball. But somewhere down the line, we turned political about this race. Now, of course, many of you probably know what I'm referencing, but I feel like I have to talk about this once again. About a week ago, I made a video titled "The NBA is Scared of Nikola Jokic" or something like that, and it did pretty well. And in the video, I was primarily talking about Kendrick Perkins and the things he's been saying about Jokic. Now, me personally, I've never been the type to do anti-Jokic propaganda, but I've seen a lot of members of the media doing it. But the reason why I even made that video was because he was attacking Jokic on something he couldn't control. If I'm being honest, I am going to stand with what I said last time. I think that Kendrick Perkins saying Jokic is only going to win the MVP because he's white is a complete lie. In fact, I think this whole argument is disingenuous. Now, there was a part 2 to that story that I never talked about, even though I had many intentions to do so. A couple days later, Redick would go on First Take and he would respond to what Kendrick said. I 1000 agree with what Redick was saying in that video. And to even prove I've still felt this way, if you go to my Twitter, I literally quote tweeted that and said, "Own that fraud, JJ." Now, real quick, I do want to touch on this topic before I get to the main point. The argument of Jokic winning the MVP because he's white is not true at all. In my last video, I did forget to dissect this part of Kendrick Perkins' argument, but Perk, he left out a couple facts. First off, and I think this is very subjective, Perkins kept saying that Jokic was just stat padding his assists. He claimed that Nikola Jokic was trying to just pass it to his teammate and make him shoot real quick so he can get the assist. But for one, all you have to do is sit down and watch a Nuggets game to know that's not true. One of the reasons why I love Nikola Jokic as a playmaker is because he knows how to make the right pass. Jokic doesn't need the ball in his hands for too long to make the right read. In fact, when we look at players that are averaging 7, 8, maybe even 9 assists, according to NBA.com, he is at the bottom when it comes to time of possession per possession. So that is a lie, and we have numbers to break that down. Now, I want to move on from Jokic as a player and talk about that whole white MVP conversation. When Kendrick Perkins brought up that stat of players that were not top 10 in scoring that won MVP that were white, he brought up 2 other players, not including Jokic. Those 2 players were Steve Nash and Dirk Nowitzki. I mean, personally, I didn't care that they weren't top 10 in scoring, but you know what? I wanted to do a little bit of research. Surely Kendrick Perkins, who goes on national television, is not going to spread some take with no facts, right? Dirk Nowitzki, when he won the MVP in 2006, was tied for 10th in scoring. All you had to do was scroll 1 position down and you would see Dirk at 11. The only reason why Dirk is 11 and Tracy McGrady is at 10 is while they have the same points per game average, I imagine that Tracy McGrady had a couple more points. However, when we rank players as top 10 in scoring, we look at their points per game average, not total points. And surely enough, in this situation, Dirk Nowitzki is a top 10 scorer in 2006. Also, I forgot that Jokic would technically count in this equation, and last year Jokic was also tied for top 10 in scoring. And I don't think Kendrick Perkins actually believes that points per game is the biggest factor of winning the MVP. Also, there's a reason that he said 1990 as the cutoff point, because before 1990, Magic Johnson was winning MVPs and he was not top 10 in scoring. I don't know if Kendrick Perkins just said, fuck it, let me pick 1990, or if he did this on purpose. My mind is telling me he didn't do it on purpose because he's a fucking idiot, but I don't know anymore. Now, I want to transition into Redick and what happened when he went on First Take. And the time I'm talking about is when he actually went up versus Kendrick Perkins and he asked him about what he said. And there is a reason why Redick is one of my favorite analysts.
It was just a strange thing It was just a strange.
But why did you cut it off at 1990 though? Because that was convenient. That was convenient.
I'm just saying.
That was
Hold
convenient.
on, time out. It was just a strange thing that it just happened. It was just a strange thing in 2006 when Kobe averaged 31, when he was playing with Kwame Brown and Smush Parker.
And what was the record that year? 42 and 40. They were 42 and 40.
So they made the playoffs.
First off, I'm gonna give all the credit in the world to JJ Redick for going full steam at Kendrick Perkins and not letting up. Also, Kendrick Perkins is a fucking hypocrite. We attacked Russell Westbrook and we attacked Nikola Jokic when they won MVP, but they were on a quote-unquote bad team. But now you're saying just because Kobe Bryant led a shitty Lakers team to the playoffs, not the finals, the playoffs, that he should win MVP? For my criteria, the MVP needs to be around the top 3 seed in the respected conference. And Kobe was not a top 3 seed that year. You keep complaining that the criteria has changed, but that's not true. If anything, you're also trying to change the criteria.
I don't know how you judging it. Is we judging off of advanced stats or who's the most valuable player? You take him off this team? We don't know.
Hey fat fuck, let me break it down for you. For one, you have to be the most impactful player on your team. You need to be in a top seed in your respected conference. You also need to have a really special performance sometime in the year. While points per game can definitely help your case, it is not the end all be all of the conversation. The criteria hasn't changed. We've made exceptions in the past, but the criteria has never changed.
Since you do want to bring it up, we do know this, that when it comes to MVP vote, 80% of the voters are white American.
This is 100% a fucking lie. Now, I want you to remember this number. 80% of the voters who vote for the MVP or all awards are essentially white Americans. How true is this statement? The following day, Molly would go on First Take and she would clarify that this is not true, but she was so vague about it, I completely threw it out the window. Like, if you wanted to know what a PR statement looked like, well, here you go. But I actually wanted to know, what is the exact number of white voters compared to other races? And thank God, before I was about to do all this research, someone else actually broke down the numbers. I want to give a big thank you to Legend of Winning. He's another NBA YouTuber. He's fucking amazing at what he does. Now, Lo actually took the time to look at the voting, and here's what he came up with. Last season, the voters were 60% white, 25% black, and 15% other races. Now, some people might hear that and say, oh, but there's still a majority of white voters. And yeah, that's definitely true, but let me just say this. 80% and 60% are two completely different numbers. So no, it's not 80% white voters and they're trying to spread this Jokic white propaganda. That's not true. That's a fucking lie. The fact that we needed an NBA YouTuber, which no disrespect to Lo, I'm not trying to say he's anything less than that, but seriously, we had to get someone else to find it that's not even working for ESPN. I don't know if they were afraid to admit the fact that they have technically more white voters, even though it's not that far off. And I don't know if Perk was lying on purpose or if he didn't know, which I feel like I've said multiple times in this video. But if you were going to say, quote, I do know this, and then you follow up with a complete lie, well, what does that tell you? You are talking bullshit. You're not telling facts, and you are completely lying, trying to justify a point. But anyways, the point I'm trying to make is that this video will more than likely reach an audience that is full of quote unquote woke people. Because tell me why I see a woke Twitter account, the word woke is literally in their name, reposting what JJ Redick said. I am not on the political side of Twitter whatsoever. The only time I really see politics is when I see older people that I follow on Twitter essentially just retweet stuff. But the fact that a woke Twitter account took what JJ Redick said and was trying to spread some bullshit is ridiculous. And this is where the entire argument of this video comes in. The MVP race has essentially left the NBA to an extent. It is not just the, oh, who's a better basketball player. Somewhere down the line, it became a fucking fight. Oh, you think Joel Embiid should win the MVP? Well, here's why he's a fraud and why he's a terrible player. Oh, you think Jokic should win? Well, here's this and that. And now we've gotten to the point where race is somehow involved in this. And I know, me even saying the sentence, I'm gonna have someone say, oh, here he is, this person trying to spread fucking politics. The NBA and race do not go together very often. If Nikola Jokic wins the MVP, it is not going to be because he's white. And you know what? There's something that no one is talking about that I feel like I have to say. I've seen the argument of, oh, look at Nikola Jokic getting all this protection because he's white. If you've been a fan for more than 2 years, years, hell, even this year I've seen, you would know that Nikola Jokic has been getting criticized when he won the MVP. It does not take long for you to look and see that Nikola Jokic was a part of a xenophobia problem we saw with the NBA last year. Every time Nikola Jokic messed up, you had guys like Nick Wright and Colin Cowherd trying to destroy this man. And trust me, these were not the only two. Ironically, the top 3 MVP candidates, in my opinion, Joel Embiid, Giannis, and Jokic, have dealt with the craziest amount of xenophobia these past years. And for once, Jokic is finally getting the love he deserves by some parts of the media, and now the dialogue is if he wins the MVP, it's only because he's white. We need to stop doing this to the MVP race, where if we're going to talk good about one player, we need to tear another one down. Do I think Giannis is a better player than, let's say, Nikola Jokic? Yeah, but that's just my opinion. Sure, I'm gonna break down facts and my reasons why, but if you comment and say like, oh, I think Nikola Jokic is better because X, Y, and Z, I'm not gonna get mad at you. I'm not gonna say, oh, that's wrong, Jokic is bad, he's this and that. The only time I'm actually gonna get mad when I talk about basketball is when we just lie about people. Kendrick Perkins bringing up 3 times a player won MVP and he wasn't top 10 in scoring, that was a half truth. Well, technically, he was only 1/3 of the way right. Also, Perkins trying to take back what he said, even though he clearly implied it, is disgusting. If someone were to ask me, what is my favorite fast food place to get chicken, and I say, oh, I don't know, but let me just say the place I like has a dog as their mascot, and I'll let you think about it, you might think of Raising Cane's. And if you say, oh, so your favorite chicken place is Raising Cane's, and I'm like, oh, that's not what I said, I basically implied it. And it would especially be evident if I later said, let me tell you this though, Cane's has the best sauce out there. So you claimed early on that you didn't believe that, but then you reinforced what you said. This does not make sense. If the message was not clear to you already, the main point of this video was that Kendrick Perkins is ruining the MVP conversation, and so are people on Twitter. Also, Raising Cane's clears any chicken place. If you guys enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe, and as always, how the fuck does Kendrick Perkins still have a job, you fuck?
Let's fuck that bitch till the day I die. 220 on the dash, I got bloody red eyes. I got the pack coming in.